Hello fellow tacticians. Sorry it took me a little longer than I wanted to make this video, however, kinda glad there was a delay in it, because now I get to not only do the Black Templar reworks and buffs, but I can also talk to you a little bit about the Space Wolves as well, all in one sweet place. The good news is, the reason for the delay is I got a promotion at work, so yay, that's always fun. Bad news is, it means a little less time right now as, kind of getting used to everything to make videos, so I will still do my best to pump out content. It just might be a little bit slower, so please bear with me. So, as noted in the roadmap, we finally have all the details here for everybody regarding the Black Templar rework. I'm excited about it. We also have seen Ragnar come out and be kind of highlighted for everybody in game, so that means he's fair game to talk about. Now, while I'm not going to be doing gameplay footage in this video, I know, I'm sorry, one unique thing about kind of being late to the party is, now that you know I can talk about Ragnar, now that you know I can show off Ragnar, please comment down below what you really want to see me do with him. I'm going to talk in some regards about some of the areas that I think he's going to be strong, and if you want to see me highlight those areas, I already intend to, but just double down on that and I'll make sure I focus on things for everybody. Now, what's really awesome with this Black Templar rework is twofold, right? One, we know about it before it hit. That's awesome. It's what we wanted in the roadmap. Thank you, developers, for listening. I appreciate it. But not only that, they also gave a little bit of feedback about why they're doing what they're doing. And it's very insightful for me as a content creator. And hopefully it's insightful for you as the community to say, hey, this is fantastic. I now know why they're making these changes, and I know what the intent for these characters are. However, it's a double-edged sword, because if they go, we want this character to be great in guild raids, and then the character does absolutely dog shit in guild raids, then it's gonna kind of hurt our faith in them a little bit. So, double-edged sword, but you know what? It seems to be cutting the right way right now. Time will tell if it continues to cut, the way that they want it to cut. But I have pulled up the Imperial tier list here for everybody. And the reason is because as we go through these characters, I'm going to talk about what was changed, what was increased. I would take a look at their previous point and where I think they might be now. All this is just based on my speculation. Didn't involve the team here because I haven't had time to really coordinate with the team, and I apologize. Subject to change, and these initial looks might not be where they fall, in 2 weeks from now, let alone 2 months from now. So bear it with a little bit of salt, right? But this is currently where we are at right now with the tier list. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the developer's notes for our first Black Templar coming into here, Sword Brother Godswyl. And as you can see here on the tier list, and you'll see me looking around, I've got too many monitors and all the sorts of information up, helping my brain, right? He's currently pretty down there and weak. Godswill's active was theoretically useful in Tournament Arena, theoretically being a very big keyword there, where displacement can be a very powerful tool, especially if it also claims an objective Hex and Conquest. Once again, you have like 16 different Tournament Arena modes. He was maybe good-ish in one of them for one reason, and it's just to knock somebody off of a Hex. Yay, I suppose. Let me adjust the mic a little bit. Hopefully we got good audio. However, he would rarely find himself in a position to use the ability to its maximum effect. To combat these issues, we gave him Rapid Assault, which, if you're not familiar with Rapid Assault, we'll take a look at it when we look at Ragnar. It's a brand new trait, and I quite like it. And added Stun as a powerful debuff on his active ability to provide further utility outside of Conquest Tournament Arena. Now, yay, he has another debuff to his kit. Beautiful, I like that. Further utility is very subjective here. I've talked about what I would do to really rework certain characters and really add in a very solid rework schema to the game, and I think one of those things is enabling characters to reuse their ability. We've seen it with Ahriman, and that's stellar, and it kind of paints the ground or paves the road for that to become more of a possibility. But I honestly think that Godswyl should be able to use his active ability like every other turn. It's not that impactful. It doesn't do that much more damage. Now, maybe with it having stun, you want to increase that to 2 turns, but if you want to really provide further utility, then it needs to be more than a one and done, in my personal opinion. But still, we'll take what we can get. It's better than it was. His passive ability was very unreliable and did not provide proper synergy, since most critical hits would immediately kill his enemy. We have completely reworked it. Now it should be a reliable tool to open up opponents to devastating hits, either with his Thunderhammer or from his teammates. So now we know the developer's intent. Let's see what they did. So, they added the Rapid Assault, which is nice, and essentially that allows him to have an additional movement and deal additional damage on his first hit. We have a 10% baseline damage increase on him, which I think is stellar, and then they gave him the stun on the active. Now, the passive was really good. Instead of now doing a kind of a critical hit increase, now it's very similar to like Anufet's ability. He will now deal hit upon engaging an enemy, so when he runs up to him, and if he doesn't move, then it will activate at the end of the turn if there's no movement. And it will also still do the armor reduction across the board. So, all in all, buffs, beautiful. But let's take a look at where I think they fall for him. And currently, not that high. I don't think it's enough to really take this character and elevate him to new plateaus. He just does everything a bit better, which is nice, but still fairly weak character. I put him above Arjak and Azrael because I've discussed why I think they kind of fall a little short as well. So maybe there's room for him to grow in the future. Let's take a look at more patch notes. In this case, we have, or not patch notes, developer notes, sorry. Brother Burchard. Here's one I was a little worried about. It's because he was already in a pretty good spot, but let's see what they say. He already saw somewhat regular play in legendary events. Well, Gravis armor plus insane AoE damage will do it to a guy. Due to being an excellent tank, Gravis armor. However, his own damage was really low, not really befitting his role as an aggressor sergeant wearing power fists. Sure. And he always required a strong ally to buff his output, or the match would slow down significantly, with him and his opponents chipping away at each other with minimal damage. This was especially noticeable in the Octarius Mirror campaign. We are increasing his damage output significantly with a couple of changes, while also reworking his passive to give a more reliable effect in gameplay. Now, one interesting note here is we noticed it a lot in Octarius Mirror campaign. Now, the reason we're probably getting Black Templar reworks is because Octarius Mirror Elite is probably right around the corner. So, makes sense that that's something that they're focusing on and have in the back of their brains when they're coming out with these patch notes or updates. They added Crushing Strike. Now, if you're not familiar with this, it's only on the Tyrant Guard at the moment. Now, he gets it, so I'm really liking what they're doing. They're adding in new traits and then going, shouldn't this guy have this too? That makes a lot of sense, right? And they're going through and doing that. Now, they've nerfed his 4 hits to 3 hits for the melee and the 6 hits to the 3 hits to the ranged. They did give him a 100% damage increase, which is nice. It does offset a little bit of that hit differential. And actually, I think ultimately will end up being a net positive. He did lose 10% armor, so a little less reliability on his base tankiness, but also with his trait tankiness. Now, here's where I have a little bit of a problem. His passive is now guaranteed to AoE on ranged attacks from his previous 40% chance, and they added suppression. Sweet. But you really just talked about his identity being these crushing fists, power sergeant, and now his whole passive is still really reliant on his ranged attacks. I feel like we're missing the mark a little bit there for his identity, but fair enough. Sorry, a lot of talking today, a lot of meetings, not fun. So, what do I feel like this changes? The answer is absolutely nothing. I think he's still going to fall into the same slot and the same roles that he fell into before. He's just going to do it better. I don't think that... You could argue it would probably maybe put him above Castell and Creed. There is some theory crafting going around. Hey, now that he's a 3-hitter and he's stronger and getting a decent damage buff, does that open it up for options like Mortarion? I'll let y'all know when I know, and we'll take a look at it in the future, but right now the changes aren't available in live or the test realm, so I'm essentially reading what I got and kind of speculating with what I have. So any opinions? Would love to hear them. Always. Now, before we hop over to look at Ancient Thoread's changes, let's talk about them, and specifically what the developers said. Always seemed to be in a weird spot identity-wise. You know where he was? You know where his weird spot was? At the bottom of the barrel, and the only reason you brought him was because he needed for a campaign. That was his weird spot. His passive interacted with battle fatigue, which none of the other Black Templars had, and the active ability was also unreliable unless you could wait a long time, which was not satisfying in gameplay. Beautiful! Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful points all around. Yes. Who has battle fatigue? Cadian Guardsmen. And then Grots and Grot tanks. Oh, and now Tyranids, I think, right? But, like, cool, he gets to synergize with 3 other factions that have nothing to do with him, 2 of which are Xenos. Beautifully done. Beautifully done. Additionally, it was hard to follow how blocks from different sources were treated. We made the passive ability more relevant for Black Templars and other melee attackers, and reworked the active ability. Now, it should not feel bad to use the ability early in the battle, while still having added incentives to save it for a late turnaround. Nice. Let's take a look. Flat 3% damage increase. Nice. His new active is now a % damage increase for allies within 2 hexes, and permanent buff if 2 allies are dead. So he kind of has like this redemption thing going on. If your people die, he's ready to mess you up, and I think that's really cool and really unique. If you want to see the exact details, this is just a SparkNotes version. Hop into the game, it's right there on your front screen. His new passive. Before it was just block and blah 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 blah, and now it's going to be adding an additional melee hit for nearby units. Which, in this game, with how buffs work, hits our king. Eldrion is a prime example of why, well, Eldrion and the Bellator relationship is a prime example of why that is and how that is. Now, what do I think? I think that's going to actually move Thoread from the weak tier to the average tier, and this is just pure base speculation. I'm not sure. Hits are very valuable. His new active is nice. It's kind of like a pseudo Helbrecht kind of change there, and I think that's stellar. Now, I don't know how impactful it's going to be. Are you able, like, is that going to be enough of a buffer to warrant bringing into certain game modes? Like, that's where it's really going to come down to theory crafting and number crunching and say, okay, well, what kind of melee comps do we want to run? Spoiler alert, we're going to be looking at things like Ragnar later, who are very hit-focused, a 7-hitter on his melee attack, so, you know, maybe there's going to be options for synergy there, and that's kind of why I moved him just into average. I'm very skeptical, but I'm hopeful, right? I want to see where this can go, and I want to see what people can do with it. But overall, out of the dumpster at least, like, there's arguments to be made for his uniqueness in the game and actual value. That's stellar. Now, let's talk about the big one. The number one. Brother Jaeger. Always a fan favorite. Oh, there were so many people that was pissed that he was so weak. But his passive ability did not deliver quite as much damage as you would expect from the Emperor's Champion. This was legitimately some, like, almost verbatim criticisms that I've heard from some people in my guild and alliance. It's like, dude, for the Emperor's Champion, he hits like a fucking wet noodle. And I'm like, yeah, dude, it's underwhelming. There was a lot of you that defended him in the tier list video, and my exact words were, his passive scaling is dog shit. We feel that his abilities in general are working quite well, and he just mostly needed to touch up on the numbers to become relevant in PvP and legendary events. With the passive ability now being more threatening, we also introduced a special visual to prevent people from being caught off guard by it. Which, you know, do enough tournament arena and you'll see enough people run into your Ravos to note that that might not help, but Hey, maybe it will. Maybe it will. So let's take a look at those numbers, right? And added Rapid Assault, which is going to be that that Ragnar passive, right? The melee hits increased by 1, so he will be hitting harder, and they gave him a 91% buff to his passive. 91%. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. Now, mind you, I want to remind everybody here. We had him in the past tier. And maybe he won't be good. Maybe it's not enough. But I'm hopeful. I moved him all the way from past to the middle of average. I think maybe above Sark might be a little ambitious. He might be behind Sark here still for PvP. But that legendary release event capacity, it could be stellar. It could be absolutely stellar. I'm really excited to see if that amp is going to be enough to really bring him back in and make him usable and actually give, a little bit of credence to the individuals that were trying to defend him before. So there's not too much to be said. Exactly what we thought we wanted, we got. Now we'll see if we actually wanted it and if it was enough. So, all right. Let's talk about Helbrecht. He is a highly specialized anti-psyker unit and well accepted at that. We want to keep his identity intact and get rid of the feels bad moment where you needed to weigh the use of his active ability against him using his strong melee attack. Now you get both. And I love it. They gave him Final Vengeance, which, who cares? They also increase his health and armor, which feels really good to me. And I have the wrong image here for Helbrecht. That's not Helbrecht. That's Brother Jaeger. Actually, you know what? I feel so bad about that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a second. We're gonna fix that real quick. Yeah, you can see the behind the scenes on the tier list. But while I'm doing that and fixing this graphic, because we can't do my boy dirty like that, I would take him in to fight the Tyranids and then just get absolutely blasted. In Legendary 2, Legendary 3. It felt really bad. There we go. We're all better now. Everything's better. So it just get absolutely blasted and it felt really bad. So hopefully those extra tank stats would be pretty nice. And I had him at like gold 3. And then his active ability, adding the adjacent melee attack, is awesome. I don't feel punished for having to use his ability early, and now I actually feel like I want to invest in it more. And now I can give it to the Inceptors later in the fight for the Tyranids. Definitely, it's not a needed buff. I think he was in a good spot before. But making a legendary character feel more legendary, I'm okay with it. And, especially with how much of a pain in the ass he is to obtain, make him feel rewarding. Hell yeah, let's do this. I don't really think he changes anything for him on terms of ranking. I still think he falls behind Ulf. And after some recent things that we've seen with Screamer Killer and some numbers, and maybe with Ragnar coming out, we could see Ulf move up into the strong tier. Maybe knock Yark back, which would feel weird because Yark just got a buff. But overall, I think he kind of stays right where he's at. Maybe there's some room for, taking a look at the numbers, but he's a very one-dimensional character, anti-psyker, but he can't really be brought to Mortarion because no melee there, and that would be a bad day. So, all in all, I think he stays right where he's at. Let's talk about Njal. Now, I'm not going to bring up his stats or anything crazy like that, mainly due to the fact that we've talked about him before, and if you want to know more about Njal, go ahead and take a look at previous videos. I think Njal, the fact that he's an endgame character really hurts him in terms of this list and his inaccessibility. Now, I think there's merit to his use. His ice abilities are pretty cool. His damage is pretty damn decent if you're actually able to stack his passive. Now, super niche, and bosses are still immune to ice. Please, Snowprint, fix that. But I'm not going to keep beating that horse. There's something to be said about the fact that he's a tanky psyker, but aside from legendary release event requirements, does that really matter? I mean, it's why we gave Typhus a pretty big bump, so maybe I'm doing Njal an injustice, but you're looking at maybe 10% of the player base that could even get his shards, and then maybe 1 to 2% of the player base that are actually going to be able to unlock him in a reasonable time frame. I will do more testing with him when I unlock him on the main account, but I just don't think he's really worth doing the testing for on the test account, especially when PvP is not really a thing there. It's cool that he's probably a Celestine counter. That's awesome. Other than that, I think average right now. There's still more room to experiment with him and maybe move him up, maybe move him down, but I feel like that's a pretty generous spot for him at the moment. Good old Ragnar Blackmane. Let's go through and take a look. Spin him around real quick. We'll see, looking pretty sharp. I'm not a big fan of the top knot, to be honest with you. But he is a 7-hit melee character. It's absolutely menacing. Let's take a look at the traits real quick. We have Beast Slayer here. Huge. 20% damage to immune targets. We have Final Vengeance. We've seen it so many times. And then Rapid Assault. We're seeing that for the first time. Let me pause that right here. This unit has +1 movement until it makes a melee attack. And its first melee attack each battle deals 25% additional damage. I know there's already a video out there. I think Cage Slinky did it. And essentially it shows like him getting like a 92,000 hit on like a super buffed up Ragnar. 7 hits plus a 25% damage plus who knows what else on top of it. That is stellar. And the damage traits for being a 7-hitter, pretty damn good, right? Like you're sitting here looking at fully maxed out 1,000. But let's take a look at the active ability. Use this ability only when Ragnar has not moved. Until the end of his turn, Ragnar and all friendly characters that don't have a ranged attack gain unstoppable. So, very niche here, but like, who doesn't have ranged attacks? Bellator doesn't have ranged attacks. Ulf doesn't have ranged attacks. Like, there's units there, and maybe some of the Black Templars, right? And they gain an additional 36% crit chance, and deal an additional 33% damage up to a maximum of 2,000. Like, that's huge. That is absolutely huge. Now you're kind of want to synergize that with his Beast Slayer if possible. I'm sorry, Rapid Assault if possible, to really get the biggest hit. But you know, I got to look at how it all breaks down and what applies first to really get you the max amount of damage there. And then we also have his passive ability here, Saga of the Warrior Reborn. If Ragnar has come into contact with his melee target this turn, he deals extra 3 hits for a total of 10 or 11 if you use Ancient Thoread, right? And his critical hits deal an additional 800 damage, so that's nice. Some synergy there with Athana possibly to really get the most out of that. Now, where can you really optimize this here for guild raids? Screamer Killer, right? Screamer Killer knocks him away each turn, and then Ulf is just playing whack-a-mole in the active ability, and then Ragnar runs back and hits him with the passive each turn. The damage potential is there. Now, if he defeats 1 or more enemy characters this battle, characters, not units, characters, other Space Wolves gain this ability, so could have been stronger if it was characters, might have been a little too OP if it was characters, but overall I'm happy. I think this character has a lot of potential. I think he's going to be really strong. Unfortunately, it is chain damage, so it's 20% pierce ratio, but with that sword, you couldn't have it be anything but, right? Now, we've seen him. We've talked about him. I will do gameplay footage later. I'm sorry, I didn't really have time to do it, and then this video is completely unscripted, as you probably can tell. But where do I feel like he falls? And the answer is top tier. I genuinely think that. I think that he will still fall behind some of the staple Imperials like Bellator, Calgar, and Thad. I think he'll come in right above Roswitha, maybe higher than Thad. Like, there's arguments to be made for certain event criteria. But I looked at it like this. Roswitha is an extremely one-dimensional character who excels really well in one raid. Anti-Psychers, she could do well in the others. I feel like Ragnar is going to kind of be the same way. He's going to really excel in Screamer Killer, maybe Gaz as well, right? Gaz flies around, you can send Ragnar after his ass and just beat the shit out of him, right? And make it all satisfying. But I feel like they're kind of on that same plateau, and then Ragnar's actually going to overtake her. And that's ultimately what I feel like. Now, I haven't done this in a while, and I would be remiss if I didn't do it here. But ladies and gentlemen, a shout out to the Alliance, Chapter Invictus. If you're looking for a home, 20 guilds, 600 members, one awesome cluster, absolutely. I love this team. It has been stellar to work with them. And also, if you're on the Discord, in the original Discord, you've probably noticed the bots there now, too. Courtesy of the boys in IVS. Martin and the team there are doing a stellar job with that bot, and I am super excited to see what kind of new potential it could unlock here in the future. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Black Templars. That is Njal and Ragnar added to the tier list, and I hope to make more adjustments here in the future, deliver some Ragnar gameplay for you here soon. Let me know, like I said in the comments, what you want to see. And ladies and gentlemen, until next time, peace.